you make of TikTok's claims here? They're saying they could sue the president as early as tomorrow, saying that this is unconstitutional, what he is trying to do. Is it actually unconstitutional, or is this well within the president's power?
So it's certainly within his statutory power. Anybody can argue that they've been treated unfairly and that that's a violation of the due process clause. TikTok's going to have an uphill battle because all that's really required under the executive order is a determination that TikTok is from an adversary nation and is posing a risk to the national security of the United States or the security of Americans. And TikTok's had a lot of problems handling data. It's subject to Chinese law to a degree that makes it a little hard for them to argue that none of those things are relevant and that they shouldn't have been considered. And if they were considered, they got a kind of due process. So I'm guessing that lawsuit will make a lot of noise, but probably doesn't prevail.
You have spent time as the general counsel at the NSA. You're also the host of the weekly cyber law podcast. So I know that this is something that you've been thinking deeply about. I mean, do you believe that TikTok is a security risk to the United States?
It collects a lot of data, just as many American companies do, although it probably collects a little more. And where that data is and how it's going to be made available to foreign governments is still subject to some uncertainty. And the success of Chinese social media in the United States raises real questions, not just about whether Americans' data is going to be used against U.S. interest, but also whether the news that we all get from social media is going to be tilted in the same way that the news in Hong Kong is now tilted in favor of the Chinese government. So, those are legitimate national security concerns.
There are still a lot of questions about the logistics of how a sale to a U.S. company would actually work, because TikTok is basically a clone of its Chinese counterpart. Could ByteDance really separate out TikTok to a Microsoft or a Twitter without and truly address the president's concerns, truly separate itself from China altogether?
Oh, I think you could separate it from China altogether. You'd still have some code writers, I'm sure, in China for the time being. But a company like Microsoft and even Twitter has plenty of people who can write code, plenty of people who can administer enormous social media assets. And from the U.S. point of view, the biggest worries are what kind of political views are going to end up being surfaced for everybody in this medium. And if it's Microsoft, we can be reasonably sure it will reflect the biases of Silicon Valley and not the biases of Beijing. So, yeah, I think that a lot of that can be separated. I don't think the U.S. government could do a great job of separating it, which is why it's very valuable that a large U.S. company is interested in this and is going to negotiate to get sufficient separation that they can actually make a success of the new U.S.-based TikTok.
Now, talk to us about the impact of this when it comes to TikTok versus WeChat, which is arguably a much more vast platform used for so many different things. Of course, the parent company is Tencent, which is a huge global conglomerate. I mean, the implications of this for a WeChat and a Tencent are, perhaps far beyond what they could be for a TikTok. Talk to us about the scope of that.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and you're quite right. TikTok is a one-trick pony, and the trick is apparently engrossing, but not the sort of thing that you have to live for. But WeChat, in China, people live out of WeChat. They do everything on WeChat, and the idea that the U.S. government would try to put them out of business or make it impossible for them to operate outside of China strikes me as unlikely. I have a feeling that while the government has been thinking a lot about TikTok in a very disciplined way because of CFIUS, which is the investment committee, because the FTC and the Justice Department have been investigating them for mishandling data. They've been thinking about TikTok a long time. I think WeChat got tossed in late in the game, and the government is now very pleased that they saved themselves 45 days to figure out what exactly they're going to do about WeChat. My guess is they've already said we're sanctioning Tencent, but only as to WeChat. So they've already put League of Legends and all of the Tencent properties off to one side. And now I predict they're going to struggle with the question of what are we going to do about WeChat in the United States. I can't not believe that they're going to try to regulate WeChat in China. And then the question is, well, what are you going to do about WeChat when it shows up here on a phone of somebody who's a tourist from Beijing and they want to buy something, and the only way they know how to buy things these days is call up WeChat and buy it. So I think the U.S. government is going to struggle with that, and I would not be surprised to see some delays in the implementation of the restrictions on WeChat.
Right, and you wonder how much of this is political. Now, 2.5 months to an election, and this 45-day window gets us even closer to that. And then if they still don't know what's going on election day, that's a problem.
Well, I do think the administration has, especially the people who are China hawks, have really got the bit between their teeth. They've overridden most of the objections inside the Trump administration to a whole host of restrictions on Chinese influence on U.S. industry, and they're going to start. They're rolling them out week by week. We're going to see more, and I think it's more that the people who are China hawks want to make hay while the sun is shining, rather than that they want this in place by the election. There is a sense in Washington that whatever the Trump administration does in this area, unlike almost every place else where the Trump administration is making policy, that in this area, what they do may stick, because Democrats have not been particularly supportive of being kinder to China or Chinese industry. And so if they make changes in a Biden administration, if the election goes that way, they may not make big changes. They may make them at the margins. They may not do new things, which is probably why Peter Navarro and others in the White House are dying to get all this done by Election Day.